Tonight we embark on a chilling journey into the heart of darkness. We're diving deep into the world of truckers, those modern-day knights of the road. But instead of tales of adventure, we're focusing on the shadows lurking behind the headlights. These are true trucker horror stories, shared by the very people who lived through them. Stories that will make you question what's real and what's lurking just beyond the reach of your headlights. Stories that will leave you looking over your shoulder long after the video ends. So buckle up, turn down the lights, and hold on tight. Because tonight, we're traveling down a highway to hell, paved with the nightmares of those who dare to drive alone in the dark. Our first story comes from a seasoned trucker named Jack, a man who had seen it all in his years on the road. Jack was used to the solitude, the long stretches of highway where the only company was the hum of his engine and the ghostly glow of the moon. But what he experienced one cold December night would change his perception of the open road forever. He was hauling a load of electronics through the desolate plains of Wyoming, the wind howling like a banshee outside his cab. The radio crackled with static, the silence occasionally broken by the unsettling whine of the wind. Jack tried to focus on the road, but a growing sense of unease began to gnaw at the edges of his mind. Every time he glanced at his rearview mirror, he could have sworn he saw a flicker of movement in the darkness behind his trailer. He dismissed it as fatigue playing tricks on his eyes, but the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing mile. Hours crawled by, each one feeling longer than the last. Just as Jack began to think he was imagining things, he saw it again. This time, there was no mistaking it. A tall, gaunt figure, draped in what looked like a tattered black cloak, stood motionless in the middle of the road. Its face, if it even had one, was obscured by the deep shadows of its hood. Panic seized Jack's chest as he slammed on the brakes, the truck screeching in protest. The figure remained in the center of the road, unmoving, as if daring Jack to approach. Adrenaline surging through his veins, Jack gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white as bone. He considered his options, each one more terrifying than the last. Turning around was out of the question on the narrow highway, and he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was out there wanted him to stop. With his heart pounding in his ears, Jack slowly eased the truck forward, his eyes glued to the shadowy figure. As he got closer, he could have sworn he saw it turn its head, its gaze fixed on him with an intensity that sent shivers down his spine. Just as the truck was about to reach the figure, it vanished. One moment it was there, a terrifying silhouette against the backdrop of the night, and the next, it was gone, swallowed by the darkness as if it had never been there at all. Shaking and breathless, Jack slammed on the brakes once more, his mind reeling from what he had just witnessed. He scanned the road ahead, his eyes searching frantically for any sign of the figure, but there was nothing. Had he imagined the whole thing? Was the isolation and the darkness playing tricks on his mind? Whatever the explanation, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he had just encountered something truly sinister. Jack continued driving, his nerves still on edge, the image of the cloaked figure seared into his memory. He never saw the figure again, but the encounter left an indelible mark on his psyche. To this day, Jack refuses to drive through Wyoming at night, haunted by the memory of the dark figure on the desolate highway. And every time he glances in his rearview mirror, he can't help but wonder if he'll catch another glimpse of the entity that haunts his nightmares. Our next story takes us to the winding mountain roads of Colorado, where a young trucker named Sarah had a chilling encounter that she would never forget. Sarah, new to the world of trucking, was eager to prove herself and embrace the challenges of the open road. One foggy night, she found herself navigating the treacherous mountain passes, her headlights barely piercing the thick veil of mist. The air was heavy with moisture, and an unnatural silence hung in the air, broken only by the rhythmic thump of the windshield wipers. As Sarah cautiously navigated a particularly sharp bend, she noticed a lone figure standing on the side of the road, shrouded in the swirling fog. It appeared to be a young woman, her long hair obscuring her face, wearing a white dress that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. Concerned, Sarah slowed down, her instincts telling her that something wasn't right. The woman in the white dress seemed to be in distress, her body swaying slightly as if she were about to collapse. Sarah, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and compassion, cautiously pulled over to the side of the road, a safe distance from the mysterious figure. As she rolled down her window, a cold gust of wind slammed against her face, carrying with it the faint scent of damp earth and something else. Something unsettlingly floral and sweet. "Are you okay?" Sarah called out, her voice trembling slightly. "Do you need help?" To Sarah's surprise, the woman in white turned towards her, her face still hidden by her long, dark hair. Instead of answering, the figure began to hum, a haunting melody that seemed to seep into Sarah's bones, chilling her to the core. The radio in Sarah's truck, which had been silent until that point, suddenly crackled to life, emitting a burst of static that made Sarah jump. The humming grew louder, filling the cab of the truck, weaving its way into Sarah's mind, wrapping around her thoughts like a suffocating fog. Sarah, now truly terrified, slammed her hand down on the horn, the sudden blare echoing through the silent mountains. The figure in white flinched at the sound, and for the briefest of moments Sarah caught a glimpse of her face. It was a face frozen in a silent scream, eyes wide and empty, a chilling grimace etched across its pale, gaunt features. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the figure vanished into thin air, swallowed by the swirling fog, as if it had never been there at all. Shaking and breathless, Sarah slammed the truck into gear and sped away, the haunting melody still echoing in her ears. She had heard stories of vanishing hitchhikers, ghostly apparitions that haunted lonely stretches of road, but she had always dismissed them as mere legends. Now she realized with a shudder, those stories were all too real. The encounter left an indelible mark on Sarah's psyche, a chilling reminder that some things are best left undisturbed, hidden in the shadows of the night. And to this day, she can still hear the haunting melody of the woman in white, a chilling reminder of the night she encountered the supernatural on a desolate mountain road. Story 3. The vast emptiness of the open road. For some, it's a symbol of freedom, a chance to escape the confines of everyday life. But for truckers, those endless miles can be a breeding ground for isolation, for fear, and sometimes for something far more sinister. This story comes to us from a seasoned trucker, a man who has seen his fair share of darkness on the asphalt veins of America. He thought he'd seen it all. But one desolate night in Nevada proved him dead wrong. He was hauling a load of electronics heading east, the only company his thoughts and the faint hum of the radio. The Nevada desert stretched out on either side of the highway, a black abyss swallowing the edges of the world. As the hours ticked by, a strange static began to creep into the radio waves, a low guttural hum that sent shivers down his spine. He tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the road, but the static grew louder, more insistent, until it seemed to press against his eardrums, a physical presence in the cab of his truck. He reached for the dial, intending to change the station, to find some solace in a familiar melody, but his hand froze. The static abruptly cut out, replaced by a voice, a woman's voice choked with terror. It was faint, barely audible, but every word dripped with a raw, primal fear that chilled him to the bone. "Help me!" the voice pleaded, the words crackling with static. "Please, someone help me!" He gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, his heart pounding in his chest. Was he imagining things? Was it a trick of the static, a figment of his sleep-deprived mind? He wanted to believe it was, but deep down, a primal instinct screamed at him that something was very, very wrong. The voice on the radio continued to plead for help, each desperate cry fueling the growing sense of dread in his gut. He knew he should keep driving, that getting involved was a dangerous proposition, but some unseen force compelled him to help, to find the source of that blood-curdling plea. He scanned the desolate landscape, searching for any sign of life, any indication of who might be out there, alone and afraid in the unforgiving darkness. The headlights of his rig illuminated a figure in the distance, a lone silhouette standing by the side of the desolate highway. It was a woman, her thumb outstretched in the universal sign for a ride. He hesitated, his pulse quickening. It was late, too late to be picking up hitchhikers, especially in this desolate stretch of nothingness. His mind screamed at him to keep driving, that it was too risky, that it could be a trap. But the voice on the radio, the raw terror in that woman's voice, echoed in his ears. What if this was her, the woman who needed his help? He pulled his rig over, the air brakes sighing as he came to a stop. As he did, the voice on the radio intensified, the pleas for help growing louder, more desperate. The woman approached cautiously, her face obscured by the shadows of the night. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the roar of the engine. "Thank you so much for stopping." He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that something about the woman felt wrong, but he pushed the thought aside. He told her to get in, his voice gruff, trying to mask the unease gnawing at his insides. She slid into the passenger seat, her movements stiff, almost mechanical. He tried to make small talk, to break the oppressive silence that had descended upon the cab, but her responses were short, clipped, her gaze darting nervously around the truck. It was then that he noticed it, a small silver cross clutched tightly in her hand, her knuckles white, her fingers trembling. The cross was covered in what appeared to be blood, the metallic scent filling the enclosed space of the truck. He tried to ignore it, to convince himself it was just a trick of the light, but the coppery tang in the air was undeniable. The radio crackled again, the woman's voice now a high-pitched wail, filled with an unimaginable terror that sent chills down his spine. He glanced at his passenger, her face now illuminated by the passing headlights of a distant truck, and the blood ran cold in his veins. Her eyes, once hidden in the shadows, were now wide, unblinking, staring straight ahead with a chilling emptiness. Her grip on the bloody cross tightened, her knuckles turning whiter by the second. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat, choked by growing terror. The static on the radio intensified, then abruptly cut out, leaving a chilling silence. He dared to look at his passenger again, and the blood ran cold in his veins. Her skin was now pale, deathly pale, as if all the life had been drained from it. Her lips were drawn back in a grotesque grin, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too long. He wanted to stop the truck, but his limbs felt like lead, his body refusing to obey. The woman turned her head slowly, her unblinking eyes locking onto his with a piercing gaze. He felt a cold, clammy hand grip his arm, sending a jolt of pure fear through his body. "Thank you," she hissed, her voice a raspy whisper. "Thank you for bringing me closer." He slammed on the brakes, the truck screeching to a halt, the smell of burning rubber filling the air. He fumbled for the door handle, his heart pounding, his mind screaming to escape. As he threw open the door, he heard a gut-wrenching shriek, a sound of pure rage. He didn't look back, didn't dare to see what horrors awaited him. He ran into the darkness, the desolate landscape blurring around him, his ragged breathing the only testament to his survival. He doesn't remember how long he lay there, gasping for breath, the terror of that night seared into his memory. The rising sun forced him to his feet. He stumbled back to his truck, every muscle aching, his mind a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. The cab was empty, a silent testament to the nightmare he had barely escaped. He climbed back into the driver's seat, his hands shaking. He had to get out of there, put distance between him and that desolate stretch of highway. He drove for hours, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, until he reached the outskirts of the next town. He pulled into a truck stop, his body and mind crying out for rest. He stumbled into the diner, his legs feeling like jelly, his hands shaking so badly that he could barely hold the mug. He was lost in his own private hell, knowing he would never be the same. He paid his bill and stumbled back to his truck, eager to leave the diner, to escape the curious gazes of the other patrons. As he climbed into the cab, he noticed something strange. Lying on the passenger seat was the silver cross, still covered in blood. The metallic scent filled the enclosed space, a chilling reminder of the encounter. He picked it up gingerly, his fingers trembling. Scratched into the back of the cross was a single word: beware. He threw the cross back onto the seat, his heart pounding. He started the engine and pulled out of the truck stop with a screech of tires. He drove for hours, his mind racing with fear and confusion. What did the warning mean? Beware of what? He delivered his cargo, his movements mechanical. He kept it to himself, a dark secret buried deep within his mind. He still drives trucks, but he's never the same. Always on edge, always listening for that telltale static on the radio. The open road, once a symbol of freedom, is now a haunting reminder of that night. The road can be a lonely place, a breeding ground for fear and uncertainty. But as we've heard tonight, it can also be a gateway to something far more sinister. A place where the veil between our world and the next wears thin, where the creatures that haunt our nightmares roam free. So the next time you find yourself driving down a desolate highway, late at night, remember these stories. Remember the truckers who braved the darkness and lived to tell the tale. And remember, most importantly, that sometimes the scariest things on the road aren't the ones with headlights. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe for more chilling stories. Stay safe out there, and remember, the road can be a very lonely place.